Welcome to a brand new episode of Travis on Sports, the podcast where I discuss the latest sports news and give my thoughts. I'm your host, Travis Tyler, back after about a 2-week break. Today is Thursday, June 16th, 2022. We'll be covering the NBA Finals, the Stanley Cup Finals in the NHL, some coach hiring news, a new golf organization feuding with the PGA, the latest from around the NFL, including new ownership for a team and news about Deshaun Watson and Baker Mayfield. There's also a historic streaming deal for Major League Soccer, and we were going to do a Q&A segment at the end, but it doesn't look like any questions were submitted this week, so we'll save that for another show. Remember, for future shows to submit your questions on our Twitter and Facebook pages. We'll begin with the NBA Finals. The Golden State Warriors lead the Boston Celtics 3-2, with Game 6 being played later tonight in Boston. A win would give the Warriors their 4th championship in the last 8 years, and it's particularly impressive because they've fought their way back from having the worst record in the NBA a couple years ago to getting back to their championship form. Part of that was health, with all of their big-time players really missing some time. Klay Thompson was the most notable one with a couple injuries, but Draymond Green and Steph Curry also missed some time. The team hadn't quite been as deep in other years as well, but this year they've returned to that form and they've gotten some breakout performances, particularly Jordan Poole, and I thought Jonathan Kuminga played pretty well when he hasn't really played much, if at all, in the finals. And Andrew Wiggins is also playing some of the best ball of his career, but it's an older core, all entering their mid-30s, so the window may be closing a little bit. They've proven this year, especially in the playoffs, nearly impossible to beat when they're playing at their best. For Boston, been a little more dominant at home during the playoffs, and their defense has been one of the better defenses in the league this year, I thought, especially in the playoffs. Both Boston and Golden State play a balanced brand of team basketball that gets pretty much everybody involved, although their stars at the end of the night will have the bulk of the stats racked up and bulk of the points. But they're very similar approaches. It's just right now Golden State is the deeper team with more scorers at its disposal, more playoff experience on its side, and that's going to make things difficult for Boston. I didn't even think this would last 6 games, but so far it has. Credit Boston for sticking with it. They've played some tough teams and hung around when it looked like their backs were against the wall throughout the playoffs. So they've been stacking that talent together for a while, and they finally made it to the finals. And with how young their core is right now, they're probably going to get back there in upcoming years. In other NBA news, the Los Angeles Lakers have hired a new coach. The team hired former NBA small forward Darvin Ham, who played 12 years in the league and was a key bench player for the 2004 NBA champion Detroit Pistons that beat the Lakers in 5 games to win the title. He got into coaching as soon as his career ended in 2008 and has been part of past Lakers staffs under Mike Brown, with Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol there. He was a key assistant for the Atlanta Hawks in their 2015 season, in which they finished with the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. In this past couple years, he's been an assistant for the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks. He's been praised for his ability to teach and develop roster talent in each place that he's coached, so that's good for getting young talent into that Lakers team, which, the oldest team in the NBA this year. They don't have that young talent in there right now, but they're going to need it to mold it into a team that Lakers fans have come to expect on the floor over the historic success of the franchise. Ham is also bringing in his former teammate Rasheed Wallace as an assistant coach on that staff. The Utah Jazz are in search for a new head coach now that Quinn Snyder has decided to step down from his position. Snyder had been with the Jazz for 8 years and took the team to 6 straight playoff appearances and was a finalist for the Coach of the Year in 2018. He played at Duke in the late 80s, got his first assistant coaching job with the Clippers in 92. He's been an assistant at Duke, several NBA teams overseas in Moscow, and he's also been the head coach of the Austin Toros of the G League, and the University of Missouri for the Missouri Tigers. The Jazz won 51 games in just his third season at the helm, and like I said, they've been to the playoffs 6 of the 8 years he has been there. ESPN reported that ownership tried to convince him to return and even offered another contract extension for him, but Snyder felt it was time to walk away, and he walks away with 2 years left on his contract. The Houston Rockets and Dallas Mavericks have agreed to a trade. The Rockets trade center Christian Wood to the Dallas Mavericks for a big man Boban Marjanovic, guard Trey Burke, forward Marcus Chris, forward Sterling Brown, and the 26th overall pick in next week's NBA draft. If you look at the Mavs now, you now have a starting lineup of Luka Doncic, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jalen Brunson. If they're able to re-sign him, he is a free agent this offseason and will command a lot of teams' attention. Dwight Powell and Christian Wood. Clearly, the Mavs are winning this trade, even giving up that 26th overall pick of the first-round pick. That gives Houston a little bit of ammunition to build up a young team that's still in the beginning phases of the rebuild, really. And the players they acquired aren't going to make a difference. They aren't going to suddenly make Houston competitive. Trey Burke and Marcus Chris were both former top 10 picks that have busted. Sterling Brown's been an okay bench player for a few teams, but he's not a huge difference maker. And Boban Marjanovic, he's got the personality. Fans love him. There's nothing against him. He's just, his size is his greatest strength on the court, his greatest attribute on the court. He's a little slow-footed, which tends to happen with guys that size. And he's not that athletic. There are limitations to his conditioning and to his athletic abilities, but he is a very solid backup center in the league, and he's a very likable guy. For the Mavs, they're getting an all-star big man who's still just 26 years old. He's coming off a year where he averaged about 18 points per game and almost 11 rebounds per game. He also shoots, for a big man, lights out from three at nearly 40%, which is not normal for someone in his position. He's an incredibly athletic, balanced player. And Dallas had some troubles with their interior players when they went up against teams that had the all-star caliber players. Those positions, Wood gives them a guy who can go in and guard those positions and be a little more effective than the guys that were on the roster before that. As of right now, he's scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent after the coming season, but it adds talent at a spot that the Mavericks needed to address. The NHL season has reached the Stanley Cup Finals, with Tampa Bay and Colorado meeting in Game 1 last night. Colorado had the best record in hockey this season and made the playoffs look rather easy. Tampa Bay finished third in its division, but has made its way to the finals in search of the NHL's first three-peat since the 1980s. Game 1, Colorado got off to an early start and got 3 first-period goals on the best goaltender in the game, Andrei Vasilevsky. Very uncharacteristic start to the game from them. He did settle in, and Tampa made a game out of it. The Lightning scored 2 goals in the span of about 48 seconds, I believe it was, in the second period, and game went to overtime, tied 3-3, but in overtime, Colorado really controlled the puck for most of the period and quickly capitalized on a rebound out front and put it in the net to take Game 1 and take a 1-0 lead in the Stanley Cup Finals. Cale Makar really stood out in this game. I know if you listen to people talk about hockey, you hear his name come up all the time recently, and he's a young defenseman. And if you're a hockey fan, you're already familiar with what he is. But this is the first time I had the chance to really sit down and really watch him, and he was outstanding. He's a huge difference maker. Defensemen aren't supposed to be as fast as him, as skate as well as him, have that kind of stick handling skill, have that kind of game-changing ability on their stick. There were times in the game when it looked like there was nothing going on, and all of a sudden, Makar's creating a scoring chance on his own. Defensemen don't really do that, and he's a huge advantage for Colorado, and a player that is going to give Tampa fits throughout this series and will make a difference in some of the games in this series. We'll have to see how Tampa adjusts to how he was playing and how his teammates are able to feed off of those adjustments. The Lightning in this game, I thought they were fine once Vasilevsky settled in and stopped allowing easy goals for Colorado. But now they're trailing in the series. They've trailed earlier in the postseason. They had a really tough series against New York and pulled that one out. So each time they've fallen behind in a series so far this postseason, they've been able to come back. The only time they really didn't have a problem was in the Florida series. So the question becomes, can Tampa do it again? Can they rally for their third straight Stanley Cup? In other NHL news, the Vegas Golden Knights have hired former Boston Bruins head coach Bruce Cassidy to be their new head coach. Cassidy was a bit of a surprise firing this offseason after spending 5.5 years with the Bruins after he was tapped as the interim head coach to replace Claude Julien and earned his way to the permanent position. The Bruins won 245 games, had 108 regulation losses, and 46 overtime losses under Cassidy, and made the playoffs in each of his seasons. This year was by far the worst performance they've had. They barely made the playoffs as a wildcard team, lost to Carolina in the first round, were fourth in their division, I believe. So Cassidy is out of Boston and moves into Vegas. Vegas had also been rumored to be targeting Barry Trotz, but it's Cassidy who gets the call to replace Peter DeBoer, and it will be his third NHL head coaching job. He's got a lot of experience in college and the AHL. He was the Washington Capitals head coach for 2 years in the early 2000s. Bruins were his second job, and now Vegas becomes his third. DeBoer, Trotz, and a lot of other guys have been talked about for most of the remaining openings in the NHL, which include the Detroit Red Wings, the Dallas Stars, the Winnipeg Jets, the Philadelphia Flyers, and the aforementioned Boston Bruins. A little bit of golf news now. The PGA is facing some stiff competition as more and more of its members have left for the upstart LIV Tour, LIV Tour. I don't even know how you say it right now because it's new. It's a Saudi Arabian-funded golf tour, and it gets its name from the Roman numerals for 54, which are the number of holes that make up each tournament in the LIV world. And it's also the score that you would have if you were to birdie every hole of a par 72 course. Their first event was held in London on June 9th, so about a week ago, and won by Charles Schwartzel, who won the most prize money of a single event in golf history with $4 million in winnings from that event. The PGA has banned all LIV participants from any PGA events, and a lot of golfers leaving for the new tour have lost some sponsors. Some of the golfers that left, well, we talked about Schwartzel, Dustin Johnson, Graham McDowell, Patrick Reed, James Hyatt, Phil Mickelson played in the last tournament, Louis Oosthuizen, Ian Poulter, Lee Westwood. The CEO of the new tour is former PGA great Greg Norman. Honestly, this thing needs to get figured out. Big money is clearly the big draw. LIV is offering all these huge contracts and these huge prize purses, and that's naturally going to draw a lot of golfers in. The question I keep having, because I don't know exactly what their funding sources or whatever are, how long can they keep funding those tournaments and those huge prize packages before it starts running low and those players have to beg for the PGA to take them back? I think the PGA is wrong for banning them. It should be up to the golfers to decide which tournaments and which tours they want to participate in. In college sports, the 4 teams joining the Big 12 as expansion members will officially become members on July 1st, 2023. That's Cincinnati, BYU, Central Florida, and Houston. Texas and Oklahoma soon will be leaving for the SEC, but as of right now, it looks like they will be members of the Big 12 still in 2023, which will make it a 14-team league for that season. Because of those departures, Conference USA has lost some teams to the AAC, or the American Athletic Conference, and there's been a lot of reshuffling in college conferences. 6 teams will be leaving Conference USA for the American Athletic Conference. Also on July 1st, 2023, those teams would be Florida Atlantic, Charlotte, North Texas, Texas San Antonio, Rice, and UAB, which is Alabama Birmingham. That will also make the AAC a 14-team league. There's a couple not-so-bad teams in there. Florida Atlantic's pretty good.